So good afternoon on this nice spring day, and for once the forecast is wrong and it's not raining yet. And welcome to ScholarSip. I'm Stanislaw, Dean of Libraries, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ScholarSip session. First, I want to note that we are recording this session, and I ask everyone in the audience to please stay muted throughout the presentation. We will have time at the end for questions and comments and look forward to the food for thought discussion. So as you may have heard by now, this year marks the 10th anniversary of ScholarSip. We started this series back in March 2012 as a way to help connect inquisitive dragons to scholarship and to share a toast to the end of the academic term. So we continue to honor this tradition today. In fact, to celebrate 10 years, we, and the collective we here is Stacy, Stanislaw, who's our Director Manager of Communications and Events. In a moment of weakness, she made the bold decision to host 10 food for thought sessions running through the end of the spring term. So this session marks our halfway point, 5 down with 5 more to come. So visit our events calendar for details about upcoming sessions. So now I'm pleased to give a short introduction to today's thought-provoking speaker, Kristene Unsworth, assistant teaching professor in the Department of Criminology and Justice Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences. Professor Unsworth currently serves as the director of the Center for Science, Technology, and Society at Drexel University. She's an expert in ethics, information technologies, and policy, and her research centers on information justice, including the ethics of data access and use, as well as policy development that addresses the equitable use of information across society. She was co-principal investigator for a National Science Foundation research project on the ethics of algorithms, which led to the creation of case studies that are used in ethics education in computer science and engineering today. She's an active faculty member in the Justice Informatics program in Criminology and Justice Studies, and her courses and research focus on the intersections between information technology, people, and justice. But now, before I turn the Zoom controls over to Professor Unsworth, let us continue our scholarship tradition of raising a virtual toast, whatever that might be. I'm sure somebody should have a piece of toast going. Anyway, cheers to giving our cheers to a successful spring term. Hear, hear. So thank you again very much for joining us. Chris, over to you. Zoom controls.
Okay, thank you so much. It is great to see everybody here, and it's such a gorgeous day that I'm even more pleased that you have chosen to tune in to join me for a bit of a discussion about some ongoing work that I'm doing. And thank you, Danuta, for kind of the great introduction. I know a few people here, but not everybody. And so it's a nice way for them to at least get to know me a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share, although don't worry, I don't really have much in the way of slides. Mostly it's, just an additional some screenshots that I'll then pop out of as we're going along. So I want to talk about some research and teaching that I've been doing for quite a while. As Danuta mentioned, I was co-PI on a great project with Dean Kelly Joyce, looking at ethics of algorithms. And my goodness, I should have checked to see what year we started that project. I think maybe it was 2015. And at the time, and when we wrote the proposal, what we really wanted to do was, in this kind of STS fashion, open up this black box around algorithm design as it is used to look at data sets. Not necessarily big data, but data sets in general. And this has been an area of interest of mine for a long time. The understanding all of the unseen things that go into data and what we mean by data, and what can be done with data, and so on and so forth. And so data collection, data use, data storage even, are all really political and have a lot to do with justice and social justice. And therefore, of course, are very heavily embedded with ethics. And so I think it's important that we take the time to better understand what we're talking about, and then as educators, work with our students to do the same. So concerns about the ethical use of data have become pretty commonplace. I mentioned that Kelly and I started our Ethics of Algorithms grant in, I'm thinking 2015. And at the time, I remember going to, trying to get some participants to be a part of the study, and saying, oh, we're doing this project. It's called the Ethics of Algorithms. And we would get these quizzical looks like, what do you even mean? What are you talking about? Ethics and algorithms. Those two things don't seem to go together. Fast forward to 2022, and we hear a lot about the potential bias embedded in data, the bias embedded in the creation of algorithms, and concerns that we might have individually or socially about how we're using these kinds of technologies. So when we talk about the power of data and how data are used, the practices, though, are still pretty opaque unless you happen to work with data or are data literate to some degree. Yet the availability of data has exploded. Many of us are constantly, I don't have on my smartwatch, although I frequently, do. We all are carrying our smartphones. We are part and parcel of this, creation of this ongoing flow of data that are collected and sucked up by various agencies and organizations. Some of the data are available as open data. So what is open data? Open data are generally publicly available data sets that have been collected by government agencies. Think the Census, USDA, National Institute of Health, FBI, right, Department of Justice. And as such, the data are a part of government information. So the library people in the room, broadly, are familiar with this term, government information. I am a proud Master of Library Science degree holder, and government information is something that is near and dear to my heart. It's something I think is incredibly valuable and fascinating in and of itself. In the past, government information was literally published by the government at the government's expense. And often this was required by law. And libraries were the repositories for this information. So this idea that federal depository libraries were a big deal in public libraries. Many academic libraries were federal depository libraries. And the information and the data were freely available to use, and generally without any kind of copyright restrictions. Those of you who I'm dating myself, some of you may have spent times hanging out in GovInfo stacks in your library, one of my favorite places to hang out as an undergraduate. This kind of mysterious world of facts, statistics, maps, and other sorts of things. In 2013, it was, President Obama signed an executive order that made open machine readable data the default for government info. Okay, this is a really important part of, I think it was the first executive order, in fact, that President Obama signed. And the goal of what was the Open Data Initiative was to increase transparency and availability of government data and government information. So in addition to the access to this data, there was a goal that this would increase democratic participation, enable innovation and types of knowledge creation. And so it's a really exciting time in the world of GovInfo. And open data became and still is this kind of a movement. The open data movement is something that is still based really strongly in these kind of civil society roots for by providing the public with data and then the tools to use these data, we can increase civic participation. So all good things in a democracy that we are eager to nurture. Okay, so there are many places to access these data. So we can go to agency websites, databases, and portals, and so on. One, and I'm going to for the first time pop out of my slide, one such place is, now I got to move this my little toolbar here. One is data.gov. And I don't see everybody. How many of you have used this, are familiar with data.gov? Okay, a few of you. I love data.gov. My students, I'm sure, get really sick of me talking about data.gov, but that's my prerogative as the teacher. Data.gov has so much available here, right? And if you have looked at it, you're familiar. And it's not, it's okay, what is it? It's 335,000 data sets. There are probably many, many more government data sets that aren't even included in data.gov, though they probably should be. Some of the data that I care about for the classes I'm teaching are crime data. And so we can go ahead and do a very simple search. We see that there are a measly, just over 1,000 data
Chris,
sets.
may I interrupt, please?
Yeah.
You're not sharing the website. We still see your PowerPoint.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it automatically did that. The PowerPoint is not as interesting. Okay, new share. And I have to try and find my, one sec.
In Zoom, you can either share everything on your screen or specific items. If you click on a specific item when you share it, that's the only thing we see. If you
Oh,
click on the
okay.
little image at the upper left-hand corner that shows all of our pictures, then you're saying to share your entire screen. Everything you show will be shared.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, can you see this? Can you see data.gov now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thanks, Ed. So yeah, so this is the website, right? And we can do all sorts of swell stuff with it. And as public information, crime data are available from national to local websites. And so I'm going to just scroll up here and we can see this is Montgomery County, Maryland, Loudoun County, and so on. There are, different types of crime reports and even some historical stuff that we could look at as well. So I'll just leave this here for the time being. Exposing students to the availability of this kind of open data. And I also like to use census data a lot as well, but exposing students to the availability of data, how to access it, and the different tools to make sense of it imparts valuable and marketable skills. So crucial to this is the practice of critically examining the process for looking out for the ethical issues that may arise when working with the data. Okay, so in an attempt to achieve this, I developed 2 courses that will run in a sequence. I've taught them both 2-3 times. This is the 3rd time. And next year they will be more clearly in this sequence. The first introduced students to open data, the open data movement, and the primary tools available on websites to explore the data. Okay, so we're still here at data.gov. And if we go into this first one, we can see a fair amount of information, an explanation of what is in the data set, a link to where that data set is published, as well as the various types of files that we can access in order to do our own things with the data set. So starting out, students are sometimes, not always, frequently, let's say, familiar with Excel. Maybe they've taken a research methods class and are somewhat familiar with SPSS. Okay, so they might recognize some of this stuff. But at this stage, they don't even really need to worry too much about that. Because we can go to the actual page. This one, oh, it didn't take me there. Strange, that's fine. Well, I'll show this example with Philadelphia in just a minute. So at this point, students don't really need to have skills to work with the data themselves. But what I do want at this stage is for people to start asking questions about the data and start asking what's included, what isn't included, who's collected the data, and so on and so forth. And so in the language, science technology studies, we are opening the black box, right? We're opening up the black box that may include certain kinds of analyses that we might later do with working with this type of data. Okay. In the next course in the sequence, hang on just a second. I was so proud of myself. I actually took notes, and I think I've got my notes all mixed up. Of course I do. Hang on just a second. I don't want to miss anything because I get so excited about this. Okay, so this is a county website. Okay, so let's jump out of here, and we're going to go to another website for open data. And hopefully everybody sees this, Open Data Philly. So yeah. Like with data.gov, Open Data Philly is a resource where you can find multiple data sets focused on Philadelphia. And so it looks very similar. We see all sorts of different types of data sets from different organizations around Philadelphia. And again, this is government information that we can take a look at, we can download and do stuff with it as well. So if we, and I'm going to bump you again to another site that is also using this data. If we go to the Philadelphia Police Department website, the Philly PD, as well as I would say the majority of larger police departments around the country, have something like this crime mapper, okay, where they are connecting to open data and providing behind the scenes tools for people to start exploring the data sets. And so, for example, we could just, I don't know if any of you have played around with this. We could just, draw a box around maybe this area. And we go back here, okay. It provides us with a few different types of crime that are tracked. We can look toward last month if we want and look at the different crimes. We can even go 6 months back, and we can select our own date range if we would like. In addition here, you can see some more statistics that we've heard a lot about in Philadelphia because of our horribly high homicide rate. But you see that we have this dashboard, and it's pretty easy to get this information and to start kind of looking at it, try to just, for ourselves, kind of, maybe understand it. We also see some of, these are our homicide reports. And then when we go down here, we have the opportunity to go to access the raw crime data, okay? And so in this first class, we don't really delve much into the raw crime data. We might a little bit, but mostly this class is about letting students know the breadth of crime data that is easily available for us to look at, okay? Which I think in and of itself is super important. So in the next course, we decided we go further, okay? So we will, for example, rather, I'm not going to click on this, it's a zip file. Well, let's go back to OpenPhilly. If you look down below, you'll see that this link takes us to openphilly.org to the data set. Okay. I'll go ahead and do it. I don't need to download it, I don't think. Oh, I was afraid of that. Okay. Okay, there we go. So here we can actually get the data, and we see the data is available in a CSV file from going CSV back to 2006. And so we can go ahead and click on that. And we get more metadata about what's available on this data set. And again, in class, we're asking who's collecting this data, who owns this data. These are part one and part one crimes. So what does that mean? So really kind of helping students think more critically about what's beyond just the data set, or in this case, the Excel sheet itself, okay? And so the way that I have decided to move forward with this next phase of the class is we use something called RStudio Cloud. Again, that many of you may be familiar with, and you may use R for your own research. So I'll just go ahead. This is the easiest way to do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring it up here. So R is a statistical programming language that is open source. And I don't know why it's asking me to log in. I haven't had to before. And because it's open source, it's particularly valuable as a skill to teach students in the field of criminology and justice studies, because some of our students may be going into law enforcement or work as crime analysts, if not working in some NGO or what have you, oftentimes places where there isn't a lot of money to buy software. They can use, once they learn R and RStudio freely, to start doing stuff and making predictions and explorations of the different data sets. Okay, so sorry, I have to do this. It should have been saved on my computer. So I'm going to try it once more. Okay. So what we do next is, in this kind of exploration, is I ask the students to go ahead and pick a data set. Pick a data set, any data set, and let's do something with it, okay? And so I'll try and, this is so weird. Of course, for the first time, it's not working. Okay. My problem is, of course, okay, here we go. Yes, no, we'll see. Okay, beautiful. Phew. Okay, so this is just the interface. Forgive me if you guys are familiar with this and you use it for yourselves. But a really cool thing about RStudio Cloud is the individuals that got together to design it. One of the things that they really care about is using it for education. And so for each class is the past 2 years, I create a workspace. I'll just click on this one for last year. And then students can join this space, okay? And I can put, you know, examples of assignments that I want them to do, load data sets, and I can also kind of look into the work that they're doing. So it's a very interactive tool for teaching a statistical programming language. It's really useful for students who may feel pretty anxious about doing something that even has the word programming in it, let alone statistical, right? So many people that are just like, oh my God, I have nothing, I don't want to do anything with statistics. I certainly don't care about programming, but I care about crime and how crime is predicted, and I want to understand it better. So this is a nice way to handhold learning some of these tools. And so I'm just going to open up this one so you can kind of see get a better idea of what this looks like. Let me just take a second to resume this, and you can just see this. We could use, you can download RStudio onto your local computer, and I decided not to do that. So if students want to use one of the computers in our lab in the CJS suite, they can do that easily. And it's taking a second for it to get going. The value of this is that, here we go. Students can start looking at the data sets for themselves. And rather than reading a paper that is critical about the use of data in crime prediction, it can start looking at, well, what is this? What's being collected? Dispatch time, the number of victims, the crime names. Maybe another important thing that we might start seeing that is a huge issue when you're working with data is that you might have a data set that is incomplete, and or the different data fields haven't been filled out consistently. All of these things are really important when we start talking about consistency in data and interpreting whatever questions we might be asking from our data. Now, for those of us that do research, this is fairly self-explanatory, right? But for people who aren't familiar with research and aren't familiar with how messy a data file can be, it's very, very valuable to look at something like this and say, oh, wow, before I can even start to do a count of, let's say I want to count how many, crimes with the narcotic equipment there were, I have to just clean my data or do data wrangling. And this is an exciting thing for students to learn, to realize that they can do. And so by getting this sort of a hands-on look at what's going on under the hood, if you will, I feel like we can engage with these ethical questions and discussions at a deeper level. And so being critical in and of itself is important, and it's something that we do as educators, and we want to teach our students to be able to ask critical questions. But I think it's also important to ensure that our students are literate in these kinds of tools, right? They don't have to be data scientists right? But I think much like in the past, we taught students to use all sorts of different reference materials. I personally consider this type of data reference material. And so I think I'll stop there. That's the work I'm doing. I would love to hear what you guys might think about it and any critiques, questions you might have for me. Okay, thanks.
So Chris, is the main focus of this particular research project on trying to understand how people learn about using the data, or were you actually doing analysis of data for research?
That's a great question. It's hand in hand because I guess it's kind of parallel. Or maybe, yeah, there may be, I guess I kind of have three paths. One is, how do I best teach this kind of material and how people learn this kind of material when they aren't in a program that generally works with data? And I think that's really fascinating. That's something that's fascinated me for a really long time. Is this kind of bridging that gap. Then there are the ethical aspect, and then the aspect of, what does this mean for data prediction, and how can we more critically look at this process? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it just sort of triggers some thinking of, I think in this data age we're in, it should be considered sort of a core, at least some level of this should be a core competency, learning outcomes that a higher educated.
Yeah.
And I think actually K through 12, there's programs that are teaching use of data and the like. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of what becomes expected in the curriculum, but then also from our interests, what in an environment could be added to help people sort of do self-directed learning around this?
Yeah, well, we could definitely talk. One thing that I think would be really valuable is to include, at least, I don't know whether through the library website, links to RStudio and the tutorials, because there are also, I don't know if you noticed that, there are so many tutorials for how to use R, which is another thing that's just so cool about, open data type things, and these types of projects that are open source, as they are very much about helping others learn. But I agree with you. I would love to see this as something that our students kind of, as I said, just like learning to use research materials, that this is another type of research material. So,
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, general question.
We
work a lot. There's so many data sets out there. I work in the health sciences as a statistician for exam classes. You can write even there's a new journal that does nothing but publish data sets. You actually get a publication out of it. Looking at the data set you were starting to open, it looks like it has fairly local, precise information, like even down to an address. So careful to de-identify data before we make it available. Could somebody who knows that area figure out who the person was in the crime, and is that an issue ethically?
Absolutely, and that is one of the huge pieces of this class, right? Is like, oh, look, we've got all this information available. We have an address. Let's say we combine this information. Let's, pepper it with a little bit of census info, maybe with a little of this, a little of that. And the closer we look, when you look at that Philly, the mapping website. So I picked a mapping around the area that I live in. but it's down to, you can see exactly where these incidents happened, and you certainly, I think, could identify individuals. And so what are the ethical implications of that? And one of the final deliverable for students is they pick whatever data they find interesting, whatever data set they find interesting, and I ask them to do something with it. They have to create at least 6 visualizations, and they can be pretty simple, right? Because this isn't a stats class. This is about not being afraid to look at the data and to think critically about the data. But then in their write-up, part of their write-up is asking exactly those kind of questions. Well, my God, what if we could de-identify this? What problems might that cause, and what should we watch out for?
Chris,
Yeah.
you want to frighten your students? Have them watch John Oliver's show from last weekend. Because that's really what it was all about putting different pieces of data together and how easily people can be identified.
Yep.
But that was actually something that I was going to ask you about, is whether part of the conversation you have with students is what data is not available and perhaps why it isn't. I had a very hard time not too long ago persuading a student that the names of crime victims in a particular city for a particular period of time is not going to be publicly available.
Right.
That is just not something that gets published.
Right. Yeah. So what is available and what isn't available, I think, are practically equally important, and so when we're looking at crime data, it's also, and we talk a lot about this in our CJS classes, but, not all crime data are reported. There is a lot of crime that never gets reported. There's a lot of crime that, law enforcement agencies voluntarily submit this crime data to the FBI, for example. That reminds me, there was one other website I didn't show you all. So the FBI also has a similar website to the one that I showed you from the Philly PD, where you can look at national crime data from all the different states. And so, if we are making policy, so crime and public policy is another class that I teach. If we're making policy or even making an argument for certain policies and are using only limited data, then what are we recommending, and what are we actually saying by using that type of incomplete data? And I think in that case, it's particularly important because oftentimes when we're working at the policy level, maybe individuals are working again for a police department or maybe a nonprofit. They might not have the same skill set of research rigor that we have at the university. And so teaching undergraduate students to ask these questions is really important, vitally important, I think.
Actually, that in this whole question of privacy, which is the area that you're getting into, and sort of rights to privacy, I'm concerned too of the trends that providing identifiable information and the degree to which you can identify a person in that are motivated by business interests, data to see what your behavior is, whether it's reading materials, whether it's shopping habits, whether it's whatever activities might be of interest to target an audience for ultimately
Mhm, mhm.
really.
Yes, so the information, the data that I was talking about are, you know, primarily public information, but we could certainly, there's no reason we couldn't do similar things with Twitter data. That's easy to get.
Yeah. What I was getting at is that how do you relate the principle behind, you know, you're saying, well, why culturally should people start thinking that it's important to protect that? What is in the sense, what's the ethical dilemma here? What is it based on? As we're up against it, saying, well, you know, mechanically it protected it on this particular use, but understanding where it fits in a broader sense, if you combine a couple of databases, you could determine a number of other things about its behavior, whether it's government information or not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, that is such an important and loaded question, right? And at what, you know, I asked my students, I'm teaching a course on surveillance technology and law this quarter that they teach every year. And, you know, we worry about this kind of slippery slope that we become complacent and comfortable with certain, you know, so with so much data that being collected about us. And are we at the point that our conveniences of using something like, I was picking on myself, so using Google and Google services, that those conveniences are so important that we just don't care if they're collecting the information. So I turned off my location information a couple of weeks ago as an experiment, and all the information to like help personalize the ads that you get. Because I was like, they don't need it. I'm going to turn it off. And I have become very, very used to having the personalization. And so what's the cost of that? For me personally, but also, you know, societally. And I think these are the questions of our age as we're trying to negotiate what we consider private.
You're getting into a very sticky area. You know, when you're talking about that, because you think about what led up to, you know, the Facebook connection to the insurrection, you know, and how the content people saw was curated based on where they went to look around, or where they, you know, so that is very big brotherish and very scary when you have some people who are very skilled in manipulating that. And so, you know, maybe we need to do a little bit better education with our students in courses such as these, to educate them and to be, you know, more critical evaluators of this and calling it out, or maybe, you know, grassroots momentum to create kind of some invisibility for people, you know, because, you know, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm always, you know, asking my students, you know, does it matter? What is this trade-off? Is this something that you're concerned with? And you know, there's some more recent academic research that's been written. Shoshana Zuboff is her name, on surveillance capitalism, and it's exactly it. The all of the data as a resource that someone can make money off of, and as you know, then I wonder, well, is that genie out of the bottle then? And if it is, what to do about it? So.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's $1 million question.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the $1 million commodity as well, right? So.
I can't help but interject here. I had a stint on a jury duty, grand jury duty. And one of the things that amazed me was in terms of the sophistication that criminals have managed in terms of getting to dark data, data,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for ability to hide behind various cryptocurrency and use of funding to pass illegal whatever drugs, materials, and how our law enforcement can identify who they are with different things that are you wouldn't think are connected at all to the crimes. Birth records, marriage licenses, driver's license information, and having a number of little hooks and so it becomes almost a cat and mouse game. Who can outsmart the others in terms of using data? And I think part of it is the innocent bystanders, bystand by people that aren't even conscious what's going on. Why is this an issue? And it's very interesting to watch, the body of peer jurists wondering, why would they do that? And I think this is again raising a social consciousness about and a cultural understanding. Where is our values falling and what are we doing? Certainly, I thought you might be going a little bit more into your interest about bias and how do you keep out biases, omission or not of information for a purpose. And interesting your thoughts on how that can be even taught or managed or brought in.
Lately, I've been playing with taking my thinking in a slightly different direction around bias and saying human beings are biased. We categorize and classify the world around us. And given that, what steps can we take to put the brakes on, right? And maybe, and I like I said, I'm just playing around with this. I haven't written anything or about it yet, but maybe if that privacy question, if we can't address that, maybe we should start from we are biased, bad things can potentially happen. So what structures, what regulations can we build around that to protect? So, yeah.
I think the other thing too, it's I agree that we are innately biased, but I think that there needs to be, it is what it is. We have to recognize that we're biased and then figure out how we can move forward with that bias, because it's going to be there regardless, So that's the rub, and that's where a lot of people are struggling.
Yeah, I think that is really important, and I think it forces responsibility on us as individuals, responsibility for our our language and actions, and then we can I don't know. I think that's a way to really get at a lot of these concerns.
Well, you've certainly triggered some interesting conversation, Chris. We thought you might.
Good. I'm glad. I wish I had all sorts of answers.
Sorry?
I wish I had all sorts of answers. Right.
That's a bias view.
Some people say the concept of truly de-identified data is almost becoming non-existent.
Yeah, I am beginning to wonder that myself. That's, yeah, and then that goes back to like, okay, the cat's out of the bag. Now what? Oh, thanks for these links. Yeah, weapons of mass destruction, most definitely. That's one. I was going to mention that as well. And she just published another book, and I can't think of the title right now. Elephant in the lab. Great.
Let's see.
The Elephant in the Lab article is very interesting. If you're wondering, why Elsevier is so generous to keep making Mendeley available for free, that will tell you. They're collecting an awful lot of data.
Absolutely. Just like the why Throwback Thursday on Facebook is a great way to train facial recognition technology. So.
And all the clickbait you get in your emails.
Right.
Facebook in particular. Stupid games, etc. People click on them and try them, and they're all nothing but clickbait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was your first car?
Mm-hmm.
Also giving
My
away.
first car was a password. Yes.
That's your password. You're giving away your password. People that don't realize.
Are you supposed to give right answers to those questions?
I have in all my social media presence put my wrong birthday. So I constantly get birthday wishes on this fictitious birthday because I purposely did that because I didn't want to have anything, any accurate information. I just use it to stay up to date with the kids. And, but it's interesting, because I even get it from vendors, happy birthday, so it's being mined.
It used to be very much the norm with young people my son's age, early 30s, that they used made-up names on their Facebook accounts. And it was primarily to prevent potential employers from, looking up their Facebook posts. And I think Facebook has instituted all kinds of barriers now to doing that. But they knew back then, 10 years ago, that there was an advantage to hiding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember a number of years ago when Facebook made this claim that you had to log in with your true identity, and how in the LGBTQ plus community that was there was a huge amount of uproar because why, if I'm trans and I have this other person, then I should be able to experience that aspect of myself until the point that I'm ready to share that with others.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Chris, and everybody who attended, thank you so much. Let's thank her again for taking time to share your work, and thank you all for joining us. And Stacy, do you want to give a plug to the next one? We've got 5 more to go, but I hope you'll all come back. We'll be adding you to our VIP list, so you'll get our newsletter and updates. But we're having coming up soon.
So we have a couple weeks for the next one. I kind of spaced it out. The next event, the next ScholarSip event, is May 4th, and that will be with Jennifer Stanford, who is one of the co-directors of CASTLE, and she's a associate professor of biology. She'll be talking about teaching STEM content in higher ed. So that'll be a really good one. That is from 10 to 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. So slightly different time, but same format. So we hope you'll attend. And then also just a quick plug for our Celebrating Drexel Authors event, which we co-host with the provost. That's coming up on April 27th from 4 to 6. We'll be in person together, which is really exciting, at the Study Hotel, just kind of across the street from the library, but then also virtually if you can't make it in person. So please come out in person, virtually, to celebrate our authors. And then we hope to see you at our next 5 ScholarSip events, if I make it through all of it.
Now you're encouraging us to start drinking at 10 in the morning.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that.
I mean, so coffee, tea, you could have an Irish coffee at 10 in the morning. That's totally respectable. It's brunch.
Yeah, mimosas, right? Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Chris, very much for joining us, and all the rest of you for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.